I need to update that. That should say Impact Award. Dean's List, Woody Flowers, Engineering and Software Achievements. Now, I like to say this is not a science fair. It's a bot-on-bot sport. So building a turret might be a goal you have. I think that should depend on what the game is. Building, swerve might be a goal you have, but it should depend on the game. So keep that in mind when you're deciding on your goals for engineering and software. Goals should be more like have a consistent working auto, have computer vision working to target at the goal, stuff like that, have path planning working in software, be able to have a durable robot. Those are the types of goals you want to have. Low center of gravity. I recommend making goals as individuals as well as a team, but doing this as a team is going to help point your focus for the season. If you as a team have set your sights on being an alliance captain at a competition, when kickoff starts, you're going to be thinking about, well, what robot style, what robot type will help us achieve that goal. So we've already done this season. We did it a few weeks ago. We just had a whiteboard set up. Everyone wrote some thoughts. We read through them. We talked about what we do and don't want to do on that list. And we kind of set our goals for the season, both in the competition, awards, what things we want to work towards, how we want to involve people better, changes we want to make. And it's really hard to do that once the season has started because you're so focused on the game. So there's still time. Season's less than a month away, but there's still some time to do this as a team. I highly recommend doing it. But also you should make goals for yourself. Raise your hand if you're a senior. I can't see you very well, so if you could raise it nice and high with no bent elbows. So seniors especially, I recommend that you guys do this because this is going to be your final season as a student. Even if you decide to be crazy like me or Naveed, or I don't know if Max is in the room, like some of the other people who have decided to come back. Even if you come back as a mentor, it's not the same. It's not your baby anymore. It's not your robot anymore. Think about what you want to get out of this season, what you as an individual want to achieve, what experiences you want to have. Maybe that's networking with teams. Maybe that's getting to look at robots really closely. Maybe that's getting to do some of the, fun stuff at competition that isn't robot based. Think about that. Think about what you want to learn. Think about the things you want to try because this is going to be really your last go of it. So take full advantage of that. What do you want to get out of your time in first? Okay, let's jump to the next slide. This is what our goal setting kind of looks like. This is an old picture. We basically just took the biggest whiteboard we could find and had everyone write thoughts on it. This is not from this year. This is from, I believe, 2019. And you see some of the things that, win, become the cheesy poofs, get more monies, like things that are kind of obvious, right? The goals that a lot of teams will have. But then you see like more granular stuff, break faster, listen to mentors. I agree. Working 3D printer, we achieved that. This is from a long time ago. That's how you know this is old. Pit scouting, things that will help us get to our greater goals of winning, of seeding high at competitions. Sleep, that's a big one. Okay. Now, preseason planning, preseason guidance. Take care of everything that is within your power to take care of now before the season starts. I recommend you look at this list and see, what stuff on here have we not done yet, and make sure you get it taken care of before the season starts. Select team captains. It's really hard to do this during the season. Select drivers. Don't wait for your robot to select drivers. If your team does this, I cannot stress this enough. Do not wait for your robot to be done to select your drivers, because I guarantee you it's just going to be your team captain who ends up driving the robot. Maybe that's the right person to drive your robot, but you're never going to do a real tryout. Your best driver on an old robot is going to be your best driver for this robot. It's really not game specific. The things that make a good driver aren't what game piece you pick up or what style of game it is. It's composure. It's actually being good at driving a robot. It's working well with people. It's communicating. Those things define what a good driver is. So select your driver before the season starts so it doesn't become an argument. Human player, however, we generally wait for the season to pick our human players because that is pretty game specific. There are some games where you have to throw a frisbee 54 feet. Your ideal human player for throwing cones might not be the one, throwing cones and cubes might not be the one for throwing frisbees. So you want to do a tryout during the season for that. Write a first draft of your award submissions. Cough 694. Write a first draft of your award submissions before the season starts. It makes the season a lot easier if you get this done before the season, and it's a lot harder to do during the season. Prepare materials, wheels, stock, channel, tube, motors, etc., motor controls, whatever you're going to need for the season. Swerve modules, if you're deciding to do swerve, have those ready for the season. Cough 694. Make sure all your machines are in working order so that you're not repairing them when you need them. Train new and old members. It's a little late for this, but attend off-season events. Off-season events are the best way to train drivers, to train pit members, to learn. I try to get our team to attend as many off-season events as is realistically possible. I recommend that you attend as many as you can. They're pretty inexpensive. They're one day, generally. They're over weekends, so the barrier for entry is usually pretty low. There are a lot of great off-season events all along the Northeast. I recommend attending as many as you can. And identify your team limits. So that might be your schedule. That might be the machines you have. That might be the people you have. Be realistic about these limits because you're not going to, like, for us, right? We're not going to be able to build the same robot that the cheesy poofs make. We don't have all the same resources though. We're not going to make the same robot as the Robonauts make. They literally work out of NASA. We have a lot of resources, so our limits have definitely kind of raised a bunch, but be realistic. Build the best robot that you can, not the best, that's not always going to be, and usually not going to be the best robot that's out there. Realistically, at the end of the day, everyone's final match of the season will either, except for 3 teams, will be a qualification match or a loss. Except for 3 teams. So most teams aren't going to be the best team in the world, but figure out what you can do to reach your goals for the season within your limitations. So identifying those limitations is incredibly important. And make a schedule for your season. You don't need to know what the game is to make a schedule for your season. Everyone's is going to look a little different, and obviously this changes depending on what your first event is. If you're competing week 1 first versus week 5 first, your schedule is going to look probably very different, and your motivations to get stuff finished is probably going to be very different. So make the schedule before the season starts and try to stick to it. This is our schedule. Weeks 1 through 2, we prototype, we design. Week 3, we finalize our robot's design and we begin manufacturing it. Weeks 4 through 5, those are when we build the robot. And generally, we hope that the robot's done like halfway through week 5. Usually it's end of week 5. Sometimes it extends into week 6. Depends on how complicated the robot is and our other limitations. Week 6 and 7, those are for programming, driver practice, and iteration. This last chunk, the importance of it cannot be overstated. If you think that you're going to build a robot and get it programmed and it's going to be good to go in a couple of days, you're delusional. It needs time. We always say break faster. The first version of the robot and the last version of the robot are always wildly different because the more you play, the more you try your robot, the more you're going to realize, oh, I can make this thing better, or oh wait, that broke like instantly, or that broke when we collided into the wall, or when we picked up the 4th game piece at the corner. It's even the best engineers, the greatest teams in the world, they are going to have lots and lots and lots of problems with their robot. The difference is they have those problems in week 6 and 7 and not of build season and not at their first competition. They have all that stuff ironed out by the first competition, and that's why they're so reliable. That's why their robots are so durable. That's why their autos are so consistent, because they get that stuff ironed out earlier. So if you know that you're falling behind and you're going to need to start to, continue building into week 6 and 7, what do you think you're going to need to do? It's an open question. Andrew, I'm going to need you to call on someone if there's a hand. I'll repeat the question. If you know you're falling behind schedule and your robot build is going into weeks 6 and 7, what are you going to need to do? Or like the last bit of your build season? Are there any hands, Andrew?
Yeah, over there. Maybe cut back on what you're doing with the robot and leave some mechanisms behind or for later. Did you catch that?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I did. That's exactly right. You need to start cutting stuff, right? You have a competition to attend to. You hopefully have priorities as to what's the most important. You need to scrap stuff from your robot. And you mentioned maybe bringing it back later. It really depends on what it is, right? Sometimes you want to bring it back later. Sometimes it just has to go, and that's it. And this can be really difficult, but it's necessary at this point in the year. But obviously, it depends when you're competing. We're competing week 1 this year, so we're probably going to rub up against this. Like, there's probably going to be some stuff we have to cut because we're running low on time. Okay, driver selection. So, out of curiosity, and I can see you guys, but it's kind of hard to tell. So, raise your hand, nice and tall. Who here still has to select any drivers? Is there anyone who still has to select some drivers? All right, I see a handful of hands. I see a bunch of hands. Here's what our system looks like, and you can kind of modify this to get it figured out in a short period of time. So when a driver graduates, we immediately start tryouts for the new driver right away, like right after champs, or whatever our last competition is if we don't qualify for champs. The goal is to get the right driver selected as quickly as possible so that the new driver gets as much off-season event experience under their belt as possible. This year, we were actually able to select our new operator before our first off-season event. So she got, I think, 4 off-season events worth of practice, a ton of matches, and she's like ready to go for the season. Obviously, it's a little late in the game for that, but that doesn't mean that your new driver can't get like a whole build season's worth of practice and experience and kind of getting their head right around the idea of them being the driver. Here's what our process looks like. First, we do our sign-up period, and we'll have about 20 students sign up. We have a very large team, so you probably will, other teams will have significantly less students sign up. Then we do some sort of homework, and the homework isn't about like getting them to demonstrate anything other than enthusiasm and hard work. So the homework will usually look like, Andrew, can you describe what the homework usually looks like, since you just did this?
Like scout a lot of matches and have them take notes. And usually the people that get cut from this round are people that aren't willing to like put in the work. And so that's how we get like to really know who's like gonna be our next operator or driver. So this like stage really just cuts down people that weren't serious during the sign-up period.
Yeah, so it's more for that than anything. This is really inspired by the movie Miracle. Anyone who's seen that, there's the movie Miracle about the 1988 hockey team from the U.S. But there's like a homework in there that's like 300 pages long. So we have them, scout us, and they'll write notes about driving. And usually the winning candidate will have put in a bunch of effort into this. Because that's what you want. You want enthusiasm here. You want someone who's going to really work at this, not someone who is like a secondary task for them. If they're late handing it in, if they wrote like a sentence or don't do it at all, it's easy to cut them. So at that point, we generally get down to about 15 people. Then we use the XRC simulator. Sometimes we use this, sometimes we don't. I'm a huge fan of the XRC simulator. And we just do tryouts on that. For those who don't know, it's just a simulator of the FRC game. It's getting better and better every year, and they can use controllers to play the game from the previous year. And we this year, I believe we had them we just set a very baseline score, like you have to eclipse this, and we created a Slack channel where they posted once they eclipsed it. And then a lot of them were like racing to get higher and higher scores. And then again, you see that enthusiasm, and these are all pluses. You see who's enthusiastic about this, who's really practicing with it. By the time we get to the robot, like actually trying out on the robot, we're already down to like 3 kids. And you can easily get down to like your driver at this point because there's only 1 or 2 kids who have really shown enthusiasm. And then we'll do a tryout with the physical robot. So none of what was described so far requires any meeting time, any robot time until the robot stage. So realistically, you could do this type of tryout and get down to who your drivers are without any resources. So I love this system. Then we will go to an off-season event if we haven't narrowed it down to 1 like we did this year. If we get down to, usually we're down to 2 or 3 by our off-season event, and then we'll cycle them across different matches. We like doing this because you really get a feel for what the pressure of competition, how that affects a person. And then remaining off-season events is practice. We try to stagger the ages of our drivers and operators, but this doesn't always work out. This way, we're only trying out 1 at a time. Before I move on to the next slide, are there any questions about driver selection that anyone has? Andrew, feel free to call on people if there are any hands or tell me to move on.
Did you hear Mr. Blunt?
No, it's really hard over the math team, people. Can you restate?
He asked like if we take capabilities into account, like if they can program or like do anything else, like on a team, or like if it's just purely on driving skills.
So that's an excellent question. I'd say in a way yes, in a way no. We don't want to have our driver generally be someone who has a lot of other responsibilities because that takes them away from practicing. However, what tends to happen is the driver gets so dedicated that their senior year, they're given a ton of responsibility. So like our driver who drove last year is now in his senior year, and he's now the president of our software team. This doesn't hurt because, well, he's really knowledgeable on software and he can make a bunch of changes. So it's helpful to have members of your drive team who are knowledgeable about the robot or software especially because they can make significant advancements in terms of automation in your controls, and they're going to be a lot more comfortable making those changes. And if they have controller preferences, they're just going to make that change quickly on their own. So in a way, it's a huge plus because then they can make changes, but in a way it's a minus because he's going to be very busy and it's going to definitely take away from his practice time. You don't want someone who is like knowledgeless about the robot, right? This is not going to be a good driver. Knowledge about the robot is important in terms of controlling the robot. I like to make a lot of analogies between FRC and Formula One. The drivers in Formula One have immense knowledge about the car they're driving. They can feel when something's wrong with their car. Same with your drivers. Your driver should be able to, or someone on your drive team needs to be able to drive the robot over to the driver station and diagnose a problem. So I always like to have 1 engineer and 1 software person on the drive team, but we do try to avoid having that be a person of leadership. Are there any other questions about drive team selection? All right. No, Andrew? All right, I'm going to keep going. All right. How to approach kickoff. So, kickoff, less than a month away. First tip, don't design your robot on kickoff. This is not what kickoff is for. Read the rules. Be a maniac about it. This is an absolute must. Do it as a team. Read them thoroughly. On January 6th, we are going to be in this theater that you guys are sitting in now, except we're going to be where math team is with the microphone. And we're going to, as soon as kickoff happens, we're going to watch it in there. and we are going to read through the whole game manual as a team. Now, we're going to skip through a bunch of like sections where it's, obvious, repeat. We're going to skim some spots, but we will spend a good, how long do we spend, Andrew? It's like an hour or two?
Yeah, like 2 hours. Yeah.
2 hours reading through the rules. And we talk about it, and we talk about like, what does that rule mean? What does that rule mean? Because we're trying to understand the game. Because you cannot play the game if you do not understand how to play it. Oh, I do have a quote up here. My thing is covering the quotes. So you guys can see the quotes, right? Yeah? Okay. You have to learn the rules of the game, and then you have to play better than anyone else. You really do have to understand how to play the game before you try to design a robot for it. And I know it's tempting, especially for students, right? You see the game, it's like, oh, I can pick up the cone this way. I can pick up the cube that way. What if I did this? What if we did this? You don't even know if like doing that is worth enough points to make it worthwhile, right? This year, at most events, I'd say almost all events, if you had a robot that could pick up cubes, score them low, and be fast, you would be picked at every single event. So if your goal for the season is to make playoffs, you do not have to deal with cones. But you might have some ideas for picking up cones. But you got to hold off on those. First, you got to understand what all the rules of the game is, what games are. Like what is worth the most amount of points? What could you contribute to an alliance? So read through the rules, do it as a team, read them thoroughly. Understand the ranking system. I think we're going to have it again this year. We've had it for a number of years, a 4 ranking point system, 2 ranking points for a win or 1 for a tie, and then 1 ranking point for one task, 1 ranking point for another. When does scoring take place? This is an important question to ask yourself. When does scoring take place for endgame and for auton? So thinking of endgame, a lot of the time, we have a task where we climb. If there's a task for climbing, I'm going to check, does it count as climbed when the match ends? Is it 5 seconds later? Is it when the robots come to rest? This is going to influence your design, your approach to that endgame task. Okay? And then auton, when does scoring count in auton? I like to tell the story from 2020. We were able to play one event in 2020. That year, you got points for scoring a ball into a goal, and there was like a beam break that tracked if the ball went through. And auto game pieces were counted 5 seconds after auto ended. So we were at our first competition, our only competition, and our auto was having issues where it wasn't firing the game pieces at the end of auto. And it's like, what do we do? How do we handle this? Because we knew that rule that it was counted 5 seconds later, as soon as driver control started, our operator stepped forward and right away he went straight for the button to shoot. And we started shooting, and those balls would process before that 5 second barrier went through, and they still counted as auto game pieces. So knowing that stuff really does come into play, and if you're an FRC Maniac, you should know them. Okay, so this, again, Maniac move number 1. Read the game manual, read it over and over and over again. Make it your favorite book. I always review the game manual before each competition just to make sure I feel good about it. Monitor the Q&A system. I like to check what the top teams in the world are asking. So what's 254 asking? What's 1678 asking? Because that's not only going to help you understand the game better, it's also going to give you an idea of what they're thinking. Because they're going to be thinking about the game at a higher level, and you're going to be able to steal some stuff from them if you monitor the Q&A. If you want to be an FRC Maniac, you should know the rules better than the refs of your competition. If you know the rules really, really well, you will be an asset to your team. You will be an asset to your alliance. The more people on your team that you have that are crazy about knowing the rules really well, the better chance you're going to have winning your competitions, because they're going to be able to exploit strategies, especially at early competitions. I'm actually going to skip over the videos here. This is just a video of us exploiting a rule from 2019. The videos aren't going to work well because I'm over Zoom, so I'm just going to skip by it. Okay, I might try to make this next video work. We'll see how it goes. Maniac move number 2, play the game on kickoff. We do this every year. What we do is we tape out the field on the floor, two specs, so the exact size and spacing that it is on the real field. And then we simulate games. We have people. Let me try to play this. Is this video coming through? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is us in 2018. Let me see if I can skip ahead. People are on chairs and dollies, acting as robots. And it really gives you a feel for like how long things take. Especially if you put yourself on a chair or a dolly, it slows you down to like reasonable robot speed, especially for early competitions. And simulate different robot strategies. They don't have to be the strategy that you think your robot should do. They could be strategies that you anticipate other teams will do, because that's a big part of the competition, right? Like what other robots are going to be on the field, where you get game pieces. And then we have a discussion, what people notice, where are robots getting game pieces? What was really efficient? What was really inefficient? What did you see that was kind of different than you were originally thinking? I like to think back to our 2012 season. That year, we made a critical decision on where we were going to score game pieces. And as soon as we stepped on a real field, or actually, as soon as we stepped on our practice field with like our real robot, we realized we had totally missed how easy it was to score from a protected spot on the field, and how much easier it was than actually where we decided to score. And it's because we thought it was way further because we never taped it out. So I can't overstate how helpful it is for understanding a game to just tape it out and walk it. Just walk it as a person and get a feel for how far things are. Okay. Okay, kickoff continued. List out every way that you can score, everywhere there is to score, even if you don't intend to do it, right? List out every way there is to score and to stop your opponent from scoring. Regardless of if you intend to do these tasks, list out every task in the game. Don't knock out ideas because someone else says they are illegal. Find the rule and see if they are right or not. Something that I think all of us have heard at kickoff is the following sentence. No, you can't do that. It's illegal, right? And not based on anything, not based on a rule, just vibes, right? The vibes of that seem illegal. Now, sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. Ask them to quote the rule, look up the rule yourself. Don't assume a strategy is not legal. If you feel uncomfortable speaking up and saying that, check the rules yourself and then speak up once you know that you're right or wrong. Don't. I like to think of the example of 2010. It's a long time ago, but that year, you had to score soccer balls in a goal, and then the balls were returned on this kind of overpass thing, and they were designed to go to the other side of the field towards your opponent. Well, on kickoff, someone had the idea. His name was Flynn Zager, a good friend of mine. I just went to his wedding. He had the idea of, well, what if we kind of planted under that thing where the balls come out and launch the balls back into our goal? Maybe we can create some sort of infinite loop. And then I sat in the room as someone said, you can't do that. That's illegal. The ball has to hit the ground first. It didn't have to hit the ground first. It wasn't illegal. It was a fantastic idea. Team 469, a few other teams attempted it, but Team 469 executed this perfectly. They were the best robot in the world that year. So don't assume stuff is illegal. Use the Q&A. If you do this a bunch of years, you can usually get a feel for what is and isn't illegal, or like what will or won't get updated. But don't make assumptions, and check the rules yourself. Come up with different styles of robots you might see. Think through what gameplay will look like as teams face each other, different styles. At this point, you shouldn't be thinking about what style you want your robot to be. Think about what styles you might exist. Think about what styles like the best teams at your event that you anticipate will be the best teams at your event might make. What you think the middle teams are going to make. What lower end teams are going to make. Like, think about what styles of robot you might see. And what gameplay might look like with those robots at week 1, at week 6, at district champs, at champs. Some guidance for full field games where a cycle is full field, like the one we just played, where you go all the way to human player station and back, average teams score 2-ish cycles a match. Competitive teams, 3 to 4. Elite teams, 7 to 8. This year, this has kind of jumped a bit with Swerve Drive, right? And this year we like saw some really crazy stuff where teams were scoring like 12 cycles a match, but that was like really on the high end. Like the best teams in the world, maybe 12 cycles. Half field cycles doesn't mean that these numbers double. Can anyone tell me why they think these numbers do not double if we're talking about half field cycles where you get your game pieces from midfield instead of all the way on the other side of the field? Why might cycle time not double? Any thoughts?
There's a lot more congestion.
Congestion is one reason. Not quite what I'm thinking, but you're right. Congestion can be a big part of it.
Most of the time is spent handling the pieces, not traveling.
Exactly. Most of the time is spent not in the traveling of the field, but in the picking up of the game piece and scoring of the game piece. So that's why these aren't quite doubled when you're talking about half field cycles. It's more like 1.5. It depends on your team and how good your mechanism is and what the game piece is. Analyze the autonomous period and try to design robot functionality around making auto easier. The fact of the matter is, this is a general rule of thumb for FRC. Dominate auto, dominate endgame, you're going to win regionals. Like the in-between, if you don't score as well, you can really dominate a regional with just auto and endgame. I think back to our 2022 robot. Our teleop scoring was good. It was fine. But we had an elite auto routine, and we had the end game figured out. So we were able to do really, really well at the regional level. And then we were actually able to do pretty well at champs, but we got kind of lucky with our match schedule as well. But we really prioritized our robot in that year around trying to be able to complete the 5 game piece auto task. What does that look like? Well, we built a tall robot so we'd be more accurate. We put our shooter pointed one way and our intake pointed the other because that made it so we didn't have to turn around to pick up game pieces in auto. In 2023, we made that a big priority for our robot. We made it so that our robot could pick up and score on opposite sides because we wanted to be able to do the 3-piece auto. There were some teams that were able to do it without this functionality, but most teams that were able to do 3 game piece autos were picking up and scoring on opposite sides. One thing I often hear when we suggest picking up and scoring on opposite side, which can be a very advantageous functionality in most games, is it's too difficult to drive. If someone says that, you need to ignore it because it's just wrong. You get used to it. Even if that person is your driver, you have to be like, no, you're putting a crazy limitation on our robot and our team. That can't be the reason why that you don't put your scoring and picking up on opposite sides. You should always be asking yourself during kickoff, does it make sense to pick up and score on opposite sides? Because that's going to really shape your robot. In most games, I said this earlier, but auto is crazy overpowered. If you could do the next level on end game consistently, chances are you will be in the top 2 alliances. And last, make a priority list. So once you've identified all of the tasks that are on in the game, try to prioritize them for your team and for your robot. You want to go back to the goal setting a bit here, where you think about what your goals are for the season and what tasks are going to allow you to achieve those goals. So your priority list is going to look very different if your goal is to make playoffs than if your goal is to seed first at a competition. If your goal is to seed first at champs versus make playoff at champs, your priority list is going to look really, really different. Priority lists are an absolute must. You have to take the approach of prioritizing functions, not mechanisms. Notice to this point, I haven't talked about mechanisms at all. And you shouldn't be thinking about mechanisms at all this early in the season. And I know that's really hard, especially for students. I know that's really hard, but you have to think about functionality and game tasks. Figure out which tasks you want to do and not how to do them. There are many different approaches to making a priority list. I prefer groups, like things you must do, things you want to do, things you won't do, things you might do if you have time. This list should be made after you finish your game analysis, not before. You must make this list before you start to think about mechanisms. As you prototype, you might find that some tasks are easier or more difficult than you thought, in which case you adjust your list. Because your priority list shouldn't just be about which tasks are the most important. How easy tasks are should also influence how you prioritize things. I think back to 2020, one of the easiest tasks in that game was spinning the control panel, which was all you needed was like put a wheel on a motor and that's it. Like put a wheel on a motor and a gearbox, that's it. And very low on most teams' priority lists. It was a little higher on ours, but still it was kind of not making our bot clearly because it was a little lower. But we had the conversation like, no, this is really easy. Let's prioritize it. Let's get it on the bot. So it should definitely influence it a bit how easy the task is. And as you prototype, you might realize that, hey, we ranked this task like kind of in the middle, not as an absolute must, but still pretty high. But we're realizing it's really, really difficult through our prototyping. Let's go ahead and move this down our priority list. So the priority list is kind of like a living thing. It should adjust during weeks 1 and 2 as you understand the game better and as you prototype. Here's our 2023 priority list. This opened a new tab. Can you guys see the priority list? Yeah? Okay, great. So priority number 0 is bumpers because you cannot play without bumpers. Do not leave bumpers to last. It is tragic to show up to competition with illegal bumpers and then spend all the practice day on that. And then you kind of see how it flows from there. This year we did do a full rank. Instead of the must ones, we tagged auto stuff in blue. And you kind of see how this kind of shaped our robot. You see cone pickup from ground, knocked over cone was priority 8. So that's really high on our priority list, and it made its way onto our robot, clearly. Like that really influenced our intake. Right or wrong, it really influenced our intake and influenced what our robot looked like. A lot of teams rank that really low, and their robot looked different as a result. So maybe looking back, like maybe we shouldn't have done that part. Maybe it hurt us. But we decided during kickoff and through our game analysis that, hey, it was really important to do this, and it shaped our prototyping, our development, everything. So it's very important to make these priority lists, not just to make the right decisions, but also to be unified as a team around these decisions. Right or wrong, we were unified as a team. There was never a question of should we be, scrapping this from the robot because, hey, it was really high on our priority list, so there was never an argument about it. It didn't eat up our time arguing about it. And you see, we listed out a bunch of tasks, and some of them we decided not to do. 5 game piece auto. We did not achieve that task. We decided not to go for that one. Okay, and then we did group them. Must do. We took all of those and we grouped them into must do, want to do, nice to have, don't do. Had some notes, some qualities we wanted to have. Low center of gravity, durable, fast, accurate, all that good stuff. Some wants, gentle-ish cube placement, pick up and score on opposite sides. Pick up and score on opposite sides, we really decided to make that a bigger priority than just a want, but it was a want. And then we had a long discussion on swerve versus tank, and we ended up deciding on swerve, but it was very close to being tank. Now we know how to do swerve, so final decision swerve. Now we know how to do swerve, so we feel a lot more comfortable with it, so that conversation will probably be a lot shorter this year. All right. Andrew, when is the break? I want to make sure. What time is the break at?
It's in 13 minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any questions on kickoff before I jump into prototyping? Or the stuff from the slides? I'll also give time for questions at the end, but I want to make sure I give time for questions now as well. No? All good, Andrew? Okay. So, prototyping. Now that you know what you want your robot to do, you've made a priority list, it's time to figure out the ways to do it. Don't rule out crazy ideas immediately because they could lead you down a good path, but you do have to narrow things down. You can't test absolutely every idea. Resources are limited, people are limited. We all know when there's just a bad idea, right? Like, we know the difference between a really horrible idea and that's, oh boy, that's interesting. 2019, we ended up with a suction cup to climb, and that was kind of crazy. We didn't kick it aside because it had some merit and it achieved some of our priorities. And so we tested it and we prototyped it. Other times, if someone says use a suction cup to pick up a game piece, there have been some solid robots that have done that, but we generally toss that to the side because that's really hard to do. It's not simple. It's going to eat up a lot of resources. So we kind of sweep that to the side. So pretty much anytime anyone says use a suction cup to pick up a game piece, we kind of sweep that to the side. So it's important to be able to tell the difference between like an idea that is decent and should be experimented with, and this is a wild idea. This is not within our limitations. This doesn't meet our goals. Let's brush that aside. Paring down your prototypes is helpful and important. Remember that you're not looking for the best design. You're looking for the right design for your team. Every team is different. And I like to always say, this is a Bill Belichick quote, if we're all wrong together, we can still be right. You can pick the wrong design and still be really, really freaking good. If you are united in it, if it is pointed at your priorities and your tasks, you can still be really good. I think back to our season this year. We had this crazy wooden spatula on our bot that we realistically never used after we used it in our first competition a bit. It turns out triple balancing was a lot easier than we initially thought. And it was pretty useless, but we were pretty united as a team to have it on there. And we were wrong to have it on there, but at least we were united. And I think our robot still turned out pretty good. So sometimes you can have the wrong idea, but as long as you're together on it as a team, you could still go to a really good place. Prototyping is not just for picking which mechanism will work, but also for determining dimension, motor requirements, selecting materials. So don't just use prototyping as like proofs of concept. Try to figure out what will really work, what the sizes are going to be for your robot, so that you're not figuring this stuff out just in CAD. Give yourself an idea of what compression you need on a game piece, what speed you need a shooter to be spinning to actually score a goal. Not just, oh, I can see now that a motor with this wheel can score a goal. No. What wheel works best? What motor setup works best? You should do all of this during prototyping. And my number one tip for prototyping and for robot design, rollers are usually the answer when it comes to game piece acquisition, manipulation, and launching. Even when you think they aren't the answer, they're probably the answer. So stare at a game piece and figure out how you're going to pick it up with rollers. I think when we first saw the cones, we weren't all thinking rollers maybe, but I wasn't thinking rollers are the right solution. I knew rollers were the right solution, and then I was thinking, how can rollers be used to do this? And it turned out that the best way to do it was to grab the tip of the cone with two rollers and bring it up that way and score it out the other way. Rollers are, in FRC, they're almost always the best way for game manipulation. So you should start your prototyping with rollers always. Monitor robot in 3 days for ideas and resources. For those who are unfamiliar, there is right after kickoff for a first week or two, there are a bunch of people and teams around the world who are putting out videos on YouTube and Chief Delphi of prototypes, and a lot of them are building full-on robots to play the game, and that can help you with coming up with, first of all, how the game is played better, but also some different mechanism ideas that you can prototype yourself. A lot of the time, we will have at least one mechanism that was birthed from a robot in 3 days that we saw. Also, this year, with the kit of parts, they're including the kit bot, which is going to be a full-on robot that plays the game, similar to the Everybot that 118 has been releasing. Even if you aren't building it, which I think for a lot of teams it is a great solution, especially if your team has been struggling for a number of years, it is a great solution to spend a year, build that robot, optimize that robot, improve that robot, and just kind of learn to be really efficient and have a robot that's durable and doesn't break. Durable and doesn't break doesn't mean the same thing. But even if you aren't building it, there's going to be stuff in there that teaches you how to play the game really well. There's going to be a mechanism in there that's really good. We're actually planning on building the kit bot ourselves, not to compete with it, but to understand the game better. So when the season starts, we're going to have a group that's building that robot. We've already assembled the kit chassis. I believe right now we're wiring it up with electronics, so all we'll need to do is take kind of the superstructure of the kit bot and put it on top of that robot. And then use all the Open Alliance, CAD, and blog posts. There are a bunch of teams who are Open Alliance. For those who don't know what that is they release everything about the robot. Their CAD is public, and they'll do updates on how their robot is progressing. There are great ideas in there, and they're going to show their priority lists, so you can kind of compare yours to theirs, see if you're understanding the game properly, see where you kind of are similar or different. Don't just copy what they're doing. Try to use what they're giving you to help better your understanding. Okay, let's see, 39. I think we have enough time to talk about trade-offs before we take a break. Trade-offs. So you can't and should not do everything in a game. It depends on the game, right? This year, you could realistically do everything. But for a lower resource team, it's not always a great idea. A lot of teams couldn't pick up cones off the ground, especially when they were tipped over. Right? We could do that, and we were worse than some of the best teams in the world, right? 1323, 1678. These were some of the best. 1323, best robot in the world this year, right? I think a lot of people think that. They lost one match. They were world champs. They could not pick up tipped over cones off the ground. They could not do absolutely everything there was to do in the game. So they decided, I guarantee, it's not that they didn't think of that. They knew it was something that existed and was part of the game. They decided that's not that important. We're going to put our resources elsewhere and just optimize full field cycles to the human player station, because it's going to be the same thing every single time. You can't and shouldn't do everything. Every additional task you decide to do, it's going to come at a cost. It's going to come at a cost to other mechanisms, or worse, programming and practice times. Remember that these matches, they're won and lost in Auton. Auton is really, really important for dominating, especially at the regional levels. And remember that you have partners. Again, game specific. I like to think about 2016, where you had to cross over barriers and defenses as part of your cycle, and you scored points. That year, we decided to make a taller robot, as we usually do, that couldn't go under this low bar that was 12 inches off the ground. A lot of teams decided they were going to go under that low bar. We had the strategical analysis that, hey, we only need one team on our lines to be able to achieve that task. We think that we'll be able to, at every stage of the game, have at least one team on our lines that can achieve that task, and we can just make sure that we do the other tasks really well. So we said, all right, let's remove that obstacle of having to build a robot that's 12 inches tall. Let's remove that obstacle and focus on the other things. So remember, you have partners. I like to think of 973 in 2019, 2020, and 2022. They were world champions in 2019, and they could not score on the top level of the rocket. They could not score everywhere. And they were #1 seed in their division and world champs that year. 2020, they had a tank drive and no turret, and they were tall, and they couldn't go under the, I forget what it's called, the trench run. They couldn't go under the trench run. And they were one of the best teams in the world because they put their resources elsewhere. 2022, again, they were one of the best teams in the world. They decided that there were parts of the game they weren't going to be able to do. They had in 2022, I believe, they did not have swerve drive. They did not have swerve drive, but they were still one of the best teams in the world. They were still on Einstein, and they couldn't even get all the way to the top. They only went to the high bar. They didn't go to the traversal bar. So they're one of the teams I always like to look at. It's like, what trade-offs did this team make? Because they're always one of the best teams in the world, and they always like don't play parts of the game. Be realistic about your team's limits. Decide before the season if you're capable of doing swerve, if you're capable of building a turret, if you're capable of doing an adjustable hood, and so on. These aren't the solutions to your team's limits. You don't just go, okay, we need to make that next jump. Let's do swerve. No, you need to go, all right, swerve is limiting, not being able to have swerve is limiting us in this way. Let's figure it out before the season. We got it. We're ready to make the jump. These things take years of development. Right now, 694, we're working on a turret in the off season to understand if we can build one in the on season, right? So that work gets done over years of development. We don't finish it in this off season, we're not going to put it on a robot. We probably make more advancements the following year and make our decision off of what we're able to do. So recognize what your limits are, be realistic with them. A lot of these things are becoming much easier, swerve especially, because you could just buy modules. I think the bigger task for swerve nowadays is not in the mechanical side, because mechanically it's easy now. It's actually easier than a regular drivetrain, but the real obstacle is from a software perspective. So identifying if your software team is ready for that. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions and pull things off of your robot. This is, we talked about it a bit earlier. This could be tough, but usually, honestly, 694, we're not the best at pulling that stuff off our robot. Usually stays on way too long when it shouldn't. Sometimes you cannot achieve your goals without the functionality, so it's important to understand like what things you can and can't take off, and that's what the priority list is for. Being able to tell the difference between what you can afford to remove from your robot and what you can't, being able to tell that difference is really big. With that, I think we'll pause here and take a break for 5 minutes and resume at 1:50. If you go to the bathroom or go to a different presentation, please feel free.
Actually, no. 2, 3. I offer like that.
Andrew, can you check that the computer speakers aren't pointed at the so the speakers aren't pointed at the computer? Because I was fighting echo pretty hard.
Wait, Mr. Blake, what are you saying? Wait, what?
Where are the speakers? So is it like coming from
they're
above?
they're like on the side, like right there.
They're where are they?
On the right there.
Oh, okay. So you see where the laptop is?
Yeah.
And see where the speakers are?
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, can we do something about the proximity of those things? Like, without breaking anything. Be careful not to break anything, but maybe moving the speakers out past the laptop screen or something.
They're like wired, so like you can't pull them out.
Can you just talk at the laptop? I can't hear you, Max.
Oh. Wait, it's this one. Wait, Mr. Blake, they're like wired, so like it's hard to move them further.
Turn around. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. No, don't look at me. Look the other
wait,
way.
this one, right?
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, Mr. Blade, you can't like pull them that far. Like maybe we could put them to the
I don't need them to
side.
be far from each other, but if like the laptop, like I'm getting some echoes. So if anything we can do to like point them away, like rotate them like a few degrees
point
or
them
something.
away. Yeah,
Like rotate them out
Yeah.
or something. Just because I don't know if you could notice it.
Yeah.
Could you notice that I was I slurring my speech at all?
No, you weren't. It was
Okay.
like really. Yeah,
it's
it was fine.
it's really hard when you hear yourself on like a
yeah, we should like
millisecond
put it
delay.
further away from the mic, like further away from the mic. But like, can you
Be careful
pull
not
this
to
one?
mess with the speakers.
It's not. This was not even connected.
Why? Oh,
This was not even connected.
then which one is it? It's just this one. Then put this further away from the mic. Yeah, over there though. It's like, like
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't even have to be further away. Just point it out.
Does it pull? Wait,
Not
I'll
towards
use
it.
this chair.
Or you can also move the mic, but I don't think it helps.
Yeah, I don't think it helps. We can move the mic. No, we can move the mic. No, but
I'm
move it here.
Is there a USB thing on here? There's a USB-C thing on here. Actually, that'll be. I don't know if that'll mess with it.
We'll just move this further out though. Like asphalt. It's like the farther.
Should I put it here? Max, should I put it here?
No.
Oh.
That makes it worse. You want the mic?
I mean, Max, I think it's okay
It's like
now.
better.
I'm not hearing an
I guess
echo,
it's
but
better.
Wait,
it's
Mr.
tougher
Blake,
to. It'll be
speaking.
easier to tell when it's like everyone's. I mean, I was handling it, so it's okay, I
we can't
guess.
hear it anymore.
Wait.
Wait, that's not good.
You can still hear me and everything.
Wait, how about now? Can you hear
Can you
now?
hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. Is that better? Do you still hear yourself? Do you still hear
It's gonna be hard to tell until I've really started, so
Okay.
it's fine. Don't worry
Alright.
about it. As long as everyone can still hear me.
Alright. I'm gonna also move that further.
Andrew, you let me know when I should start up again.
It's so hard for us to hear that over here. Wait, what? Okay, stand there, yeah. I think it's good. You just like hearing echo. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's right next to it. We can't really move it.
I think we're ready to get started soon.
Okay. Let me just.
You have to move the speaker.
I'm just get. Are we ready?
But it's kind of like. No, you can't move this one.
Can you quiet everyone's sound?
Guys, we're starting again!
Max laying down the hammer.
Huh? What? Right.
Okay. Andrew, we're good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for returning. Those of you who are coming from a different session, welcome. I think we're at a good stopping point. So now what I'm going to jump into is some mechanism tips that I've kind of picked up on throughout the years. Rollers, I've talked about them before, but I am rollers. I'm a big proponent of rollers. They're usually the answer when it comes to game piece acquisition and launching, even when you think they aren't. And I like to think back at 3 games when rollers were the answer and it was really hard to tell. First one is 2014. The best team in the world that year, Team 254. The game piece was a giant aerobics ball, and they built a hooded shooter. And it was actually pretty awesome to watch. Like, they're down here on the bottom right. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so they're down here at the bottom right. They would actually had 2 intakes, one on the front, one on the back, so they can hold 3 game pieces at once. And they would, the shooter's right here, and you see the hood in the back, and they would actually launch this into a high goal when other teams built catapults and punchers and all sorts of things. And this was just so much simpler and, more importantly, more accurate. So look for the roller answer. Look deep for not just picking it up, but also scoring the game piece. In 2017, you can see Team 340 here at the bottom. They had a nice roller intake for picking up these plastic gears, and a lot of teams grabbed those. We didn't even bother picking them off the ground. We just picked them up from the human player, and we just had like a chute for them, which is a pretty common, popular design. But really, the best design for manipulating these guys was just a little roller claw. There's like 2 moving parts on this. It's really simple. That's the thing about rollers, is they're not just great at picking up, scoring game pieces. They're also very simple because they don't have a lot of moving parts. You need 1 motor to power a roller. Maybe you have 2 rollers, 2 motors, whatever. And then 2019, picking up the hatch panels, which I stared out for a long time going, how do you use rollers to grab this thing? And I didn't think of doing it from the middle. Team 1323 was, 973 was the first one to release an intake like this. And by the end of the season, pretty much everyone had it. It was just 1 motor. You had 2 wheels squeezed against each other. So it had like a gear effect. So you didn't even need a gear because the wheels rubbed against each other. And you can see it in the middle of the hatch panel. And it was just fantastic at picking up and scoring these hatch panels. So look for the roller answers. If you're making a grabber, you're probably doing it wrong. They are often actually a great design choice for endgame as well. In 2020, there was something you had to climb off of, a bar in the middle of the field, and you had to get all 3 of your robots on your alliance on there. And there were extra points if the thing was balanced because the bar had like a pivot in the middle. And there were some teams who on their hooks put a roller with a motor, and they used it to move along the bar to balance it. So look for the roller answers. They're out there. One note about rollers, though, when placing a game piece, as opposed to launching it, being able to use pneumatics or some sort of release to place the game piece can be critical. So this year, not as important because you could have just kind of launched the cone onto the peg and it was okay. And you can kind of fling the cube and it was pretty easy in that sense. But pretty often, it's really helpful to be able to release the game piece, especially if it can fall off easily. It's helpful to just kind of release it on there. Building within your limits, and tip on mechanism, build within your limits, and when all else is equal, build what you've designed, prototyped, or built in the past or in the off season. And KISS, who knows what KISS stands for, what this acronym stands for? You can call it out if you know.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. That's Sam Chen?
Yeah. So.
Oh man, hi Sam. I recognize your voice. I don't see you, but I recognize your voice. Yes, keep it simple. Make your robot as simple as possible. Simple is durable. Simple is efficient. Keep your robots as simple as possible. And then on the last bullet point that I just made about looking at what you built in the past, right now, if you have been up into our lab, in our practice field is sitting every robot that we still have, because we're going to reference those robots on kickoff, the ones that are relevant to the game that we're playing, and we're going to say, okay, we built this mechanism for this game. How did it work out? What are the things we liked about it? What are the things we didn't like about it? If it was a good mechanism, we're probably going to prototype it for this new game. And we're going to know, hey, we have some understanding of how to build this thing, how to design it. And you're always going to do a better job creating what you've already tried to create before. Okay. Some build tips. Design your robot fully and thoroughly. Be maniacal about your CAD. Take the time and energy to do this, and the robot will be built much faster. I will actually always go through the team's CAD. I don't CAD any of the robot parts. The students do all of that. I go through the CAD and we'll just constantly post notes on our Slack channels like, this isn't good enough, that needs to be added, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if the sketches are undefined in a CAD, I will go in and like shift something so that it breaks. I'll let them know I did it, but I really turn into a little bit of a bully with this because it has to be done. Like, our standards are high. The standards have to be high for our CAD because it makes our build time much, much, much shorter. And also, I think it's important to teach kids that there's a right and wrong way to do something. And if you are, taking shortcuts with CAD, that's not acceptable in engineering, and it's not going to be acceptable here. So do it right. And if you do it really well, if you include everything in your CAD, you include fasteners, you include gussets, you're going to save so much time on the actual robot. It's painful, and it takes more time on the front end. Overall, you're going to save a ton more time. And then design with modularity and repairs in mind. How are you going to access that bolt? How are you going to access that axle? Are you going to remove it from the robot? What are you going to do if this part of the robot breaks? How are you going to reach it? And then modularity, because you want to be able to make a swap quickly to a new mechanism, or in competition, swap in the spare easily. Make swaps quick and easy, especially of things you expect to face lots of impact. Your intake, for instance, right? If that's going beyond your frame, beyond your, not just your frame, your bumper, it's probably going to take impact. It's probably going to need to be replaced. So keep in mind, how am I going in your design? How am I going to fix this? How am I going to replace it? And remember, your robot is not finished until the last match of your last off-season event. You should be iterating, improving. It's a process. You're not going to get it right away. There's always little things to improve about your robot to make it faster, better, more durable, more consistent. Okay. Autonomous and driver practice. This takes up a ton of time. Give the people who do it the time to do their work. I found that early on, when I was a student on the team and as a mentor, there was a very large split between our mechanical team and our software team. And I think this is a common experience for a lot of teams. There's this kind of possessiveness over the robot and unwillingness to give it up. And you have to build a culture on your team that, okay, I'm an engineer. I need to do whatever I can to put software in a position to do what they need to do. The better job I do, the better the team is going to do. The quicker I get the robot over, the better the team is going to do. If your students on your mechanical team have the thought of, well, I just want to build this mechanism. I just want to build this turret. I don't really care how it does. Like, I'd like it to work, but I don't really care how it does. They're not having a team approach. They really shouldn't be leading a mechanism then, in my opinion, if that's going to be their approach. They really have to have the mentality of, it's my responsibility to get this finished, complete, and over to software so that they can do their work. It's a team. Everyone has to have their time, and everyone's kind of portion has to be prioritized. While auto and driver practice is happening, you have to build spares and iterate designs while they work. So, if you look at 694's intake from 2023, every competition, it's a little bit different because there was constant iteration happening on it. When the robot got handed off to software the first time, the arm wasn't even on it. There was more work being done. Then the arm was ready to put on. It went back to software. Okay. Then they built the whole thing, and they realized there's X, Y, Z we want to change. Give it off to software. Let's work on redesigning it. Let's work on making it better. Something broke. Let's take it back. Can we swap something on now? No, not yet. This is a quick fix. All right, give it back to software. And then when the time comes, all right, let's put on the new one. Let's put on the new intake. Keep iterating, keep improving. Make repairs happen fast. Give more time to auto and driver practice. And communication can be really, really important here. If you're not careful, you can have the robot sit dormant for half an hour because mechanical fixed the robot, but software didn't realize the robot's fixed, so the robot's just sitting there and no one's doing anything with it. So if you are a team leader or a mentor, keeping an eye on this and helping with the flow of getting the robot where it needs to be is extremely, extremely helpful. It can save your team lots and lots of time. This is where FRC Maniacs, I think, are incredibly useful because you have to be obsessive. Like every minute of robot time has to be optimized. Drivers don't need the new bot to practice. Get them an old bot, build them a drivetrain, build them a clone drivetrain. There's lots of things you can do to get your drivers to be better and improve, especially once you figure out what your robot's going to look like and the types of cycles you're going to run. For instance, going back to the 2023 game, if you knew your robot was going to be picking up from the human player station and then scoring, well, you know what that cycle looks like and that run that the driver is going to be making back and forth. You could grab an old robot or just a drivetrain and have them simulate that run back and forth to get a feel for what that looks like and what obstacles they might crash into. And they could practice balancing, right? There's a lot you can do with an old drivetrain, so have something like that ready for your drivers and available and repaired quickly. Okay. Maniac move number 3, and this is truly crazy. Wake-up calls. So here we have Angelina. Angelina has consented to the use of this photo. Angelina is the head of your software team. She's actually the head of our electronics team, but I think software is better for this analogy. Angelina is the head of your software team and a member of your drive team. Angelina stayed up all night long tweaking that auton that wasn't quite right on practice day. Angelina just made a big mistake. Angelina's team is in for a rough morning. Angelina overslept. Don't end up like Angelina or Angelina's team. They need her. Set up wake-up calls. What we do is I'll post on Slack who needs a wake-up call tomorrow. Just thread your phone number and what time you want to be woken up. And then people, when they wake up, they just call the people on there and we do like a little, emoji reaction when the person's woken up. We've done spreadsheets in the past where like one person's managing it. The thing is, and I think most of us have experienced it, it is the worst when you have a critical member of your team, whether it is drive team, software, whatever, mechanical, a mechanism needs to be fixed, who oversleeps and then you don't have them for the morning of competition. It sets you back. Elite teams do not have this problem. I don't know how other teams go about it. We do the wake-up calls. I know it's kind of bonkers. I put in for the wake-up call because if I oversleep, that's really bad because I am like the chaperone and like nothing can happen if I'm not there. We can't even leave for the competitions, and I'm late a lot and I oversleep a lot. I'm tired a lot, so I rely on the wake-up calls as well. So that's just something crazy that we do. Okay, competition. Practice day. I believe that practice day at the regional level is the most important day of competition. You can usually figure out who's going to win a regional on practice day. They are the teams playing 6 to 10 practice matches. Be one of those teams. Before we were, as strong as we are today, when we were doing our goal setting for the season in 2015, we made our goal be at practice match number 1. And that's been a goal for our season every year. Every competition we go to, our goal is to be at practice match number 1, ready to go. And if we achieve that, we know that we did like a ton of stuff right. Like when I see our team ready for practice match 1, I go crazy with my praise of our team because it is really difficult, but it makes a huge difference. You're going to get a ton of practice matches. You're going to make sure your autos work to the field that you're on. You're going to get your drivers loosened up. Use practice day to tune the field and get your drivers comfortable and confident. Practice day is not for finishing your bumpers. It's not for finishing your robot. It is not for updating your Rio. Take care of the stuff that you need to take care of to get onto the field. To get onto the field, all you need to do is get fully inspected, and then you can be on the field for every single practice match with a slot. When we get our practice match schedule, I take a look at it, but I really don't care about it because we're just going right into that queue. On our robot cart, we have more batteries so that we can jump right back onto the queue. Until the robot breaks, we're just cycling, playing as many matches as possible. Get a full robot inspection immediately. If you're still making changes to your bot, you aren't going to have much of a chance at winning that event. Like it's true. It's going to be really hard to win an event if you're finishing it on practice day. Almost impossible. You could be like the second pick of an alliance or be like a late seed because anything can happen in a limbs. But if you're really trying to dominate an event, you need to be firing on all cylinders on practice day. Okay, competition strategy team. If you attended the panel earlier, I talked about some of this stuff. You should have a group of students dedicated to strategy at competition. Here are the base responsibilities. Something Karthik always says in his presentation is that once you arrive at the competition, it's pretty much impossible to make significant changes and improvements to your robot, but you can make huge improvements to your strategy team over the course of competition, and your strategy team can have an immense impact on your wins and losses, how you do, and how your experience is at the competition. So how this breaks down for us. On practice day, we pit scout, we talk to all the teams, we see all the robots, and my advice to you is ask as few questions as possible. Try to make it, we generally stick to fact-based questions like, what's your robot weigh, size of your robot, types of drivetrain, and then 2 questions I love that we ask. I think it's important for every game. What auto strategies do you like to run? What teleop strategies do you like to run? This will inform when you're against them, what you expect them to do, but also when you're with them, when you're about to have that match strategy conversation with them, what you anticipate they'll want to do. Scout practice matches, pretty easy. Usually there isn't a full field at the regional level. So if you don't have a ton of scouts, you can still do this pretty easily. This information is incredibly helpful during your first few qualifying matches when teams don't really know what other teams are capable of. The data from the practice matches is really going to help you figure out what teams can do, but take it with a grain of salt. Keep in mind that teams are testing things, trying different autos, trying different match strategies. They might spend an entire match, I know there were lots of teams that spent an entire match just trying their balance algorithm. They'd press a button and they'd run their balance auto just so they can perfect it. The scouting will say, this team has no idea what's going on. They're trying to balance the whole match. They don't realize you only get points for that once. They realize you only get points for that once. They recognize it's a practice match and they don't need to spend this whole match scoring. There's a focus they have and they're trying to execute that focus. And then make sure you scout. Have fun with it. Make it fun. There's a strong, this is leftover. I meant to cut this. This is like from 2022. Ignore that. But scout. We like to do paper scouting. I talked about it on the panel. We like to do paper scouting because paper scouting has no bugs. Paper scouting is really easy on you don't have to have a crazy software team to do it. You just have a sheet with one for each team, what the tasks are they did. You fill it out. You can look at it. There's not that much data to peel through, so you don't need to worry about having crazy graphics. I think a lot of teams, they go, okay, we want to do a really fancy scouting app, but they never get to really use it because their data doesn't get strong enough to really use the app. So, what's the end goal? The end goal is really strong data. That's why we use paper scouting. That's what works for us. That's not to say that it's not great for other teams, but that's what works for us. Make a pick list and do it even if you aren't in the top 8 or close. It's a good practice that will help develop good habits, and students will grow to understand better what it takes to be in the top 8. Value it more and work harder towards it. Also, if you are a team that always makes a pick list, other teams are going to pick up on that. Teams in our competition know that no matter where we're seated, we have a really good pick list ready to go. We have gotten picked because teams know, hey, I don't have a great pick list. I don't have much of a pick list at all. Is my camera about to fall, Andrew? What's happening? And I'm down.
Someone's leaning on the wall.
You still there?
I'm still here.
The camera's good.
I lost the camera there. What happened?
Someone was bouncing on the wall in the back room and knocked you off your table.
Do you know the password?
All right, thanks, Yachi. Okay. All right. I think we're still good. I'm gonna keep going.
So I have a question about scouting,
That-
actually a comment.
Yes.
Because I can. Team 102 has a scouting app which is open source and freely available to everyone, to all teams, whether they have a scouting app or anything at any rate. It's called Scout Radios, and you can look it up if you're interested. We develop it, redevelop it every year. Excuse me, I just had to jump to get your computer. There's a presentation going on about it I think right now actually. But it's freely available and everybody can use it. It's being used globally now, we can say with pride. We got Israel,
That's
Turkey,
awesome.
and Brazil, and Mexico, and Canada using it. It's cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So, thank you. I mean, that's one of the really great things. I anticipate at some point we're going to switch over to a scouting app. I've just kind of found that our scouts don't do as good of a job when they're scouting on a device versus a piece of paper. Because there's something tactile about scouting on a piece of paper. But I think it's different for other teams. For a lot of other teams, their scouts scout significantly better on an app, on an iPad, on a phone. So, and this might change for us in the future, right? And that's why we try it at off-season events, generally if we're trying a scouting app. But for us, we're sticking to paper for now. We like paper. Andrew, who's sitting over here, he's our director of strategy. So and he's also in software. So if we make a shift, it'll be on him and or whichever student wants to do that to decide. But for now, we like paper. I do recommend for teams that are starting out paper because it's just less to manage. You just have your 60 sheets for that competition and that's it, and everything's in one place. But I do not have a lot of experience with apps, so they might be better. All right, pick lists. So as I was saying, with pick lists, if you are a team that people know, it's like, hey, you can make a pick list. Like teams know they have a really great pick list regardless of how their robot's doing. That's going to make you a little more likely to get picked, honestly. So build that reputation for yourselves. Highly recommend it. Okay. Competition, working with the referees. That's me back in my reffing days. So first thing, mentors shouldn't be speaking to referees about matches, students only, but most refs allow adults to listen. So what I'll usually do is, we have a student on our drive team. Their job is to talk to the refs, and I'll just stand by and listen to the conversation being had. And I'll generally give them feedback on how the conversation went. Remember, there is no video review. And if you say to a head ref, oh, I actually have a video right here, their response will always be super negative to that. And a lot of them will disengage from the conversation with you just because you suggested that. So word of advice, don't recommend that you have a video somewhere because no refs can accept that, and the response is going to be pretty negative. I personally think video review should exist in FRC. I think there are a couple places where it's obviously should, but that time's not yet. Make sure you have someone on your drive team who is designated for the job of talking to referees and is trained on this. It's okay to be a bit annoying. Don't be a maniac here, but be persistent. There's no penalty for talking to refs, but if they don't like you, I mean, you want the referees to like you. The person who just walked back in and sat down, Jason, he is our person who talked to referees this offseason. He's gotten pretty good at it. It's important to establish a friendly rapport early on, ask them clarifying questions. Like sometimes he's our human player. So he'll ask a ref, could you take a look at how I'm doing, how I'm throwing the game pieces? Is this okay? Is this going to be a problem? Is there anything I need to adjust? The refs don't want to call penalties. They want to make sure you're playing within the rules. So they're going to answer your questions. And remember that they're volunteers. They're trying to have a good time, and they want you to have a good time too. So if you establish a good rapport with them early on, it's going to help a lot with later conversations. And remember to be respectful that these are people too. They can get overwhelmed. They're volunteering their Saturdays, their Sundays. They might be taking off of work. And they just want the kids at the competition to have a good, fair time. So try to have that perspective. And remember that the sooner you talk to referees, the better. Every second that goes by after a match makes it less likely for a change in ruling. If the next match starts, it's probably too late. If the head ref says to you, hold on a sec, I'm going to go run this match, you need to get a word in edgewise first, because they and all the other referees will have forgotten what happened by the time they're done with that match, and they're going to say to you, well, the field is clear. So how does this play out? What does this look like? Let's say, for instance, going back to 2023, you play a match and your alliance triple bounced, and you look up at the end game score and you see, hey, we didn't get points for that. Freeze your alliance, get the referee's attention, point to the robots, point to the score, point out the problem, make it stick in their brain before the robots clear the field. If you see a problem with the score and anything that is currently on the field is reflective of that, you need to immediately bring it to the referee's attention before the problem has cleared, because this is going to help you a lot in your argument for a score change, whatever, for the correction. Also, have the rules ready, right? If you think that something was wrong or called wrong, have the rule of how it should be called. If a referee called a penalty, knowing which referee called that penalty, so you can say to the head ref, it was that referee over there. That way the head ref can ask, or they might pull the ref in, ask them what they saw. They might do it to the side, but help them find the truth, right? Make it as easy as possible and make it as quick as possible after the match. As soon as you realize a problem, get in that question box, get the head ref's attention, show a sense of urgency so that they come over, so that they don't delay. Okay, be a little assertive, but again, don't be a maniac, don't be a jerk. Okay. Competition, working with partners. So one of my least favorite phrases is when I talk to a team and I ask, how's it been going? How are your matches? How's the schedule panning out? Stuff like that. I hate hearing the phrase, we had some bad partners, or our partners didn't know the rules, committed a bunch of penalties. You'll never hear me say this, because I think one of the best parts of FRC is the kind of random match schedule that you get to play with different teams at different levels of preparation. I think that one of the things that our team brings to the table is that we could take a team that commits a bunch of penalties, that has a robot that's not working really well, and help lift them up, help tell them, hey, this is the rule you're breaking a lot. Here's how it's been called. Maybe one of the common ones that I find is a team gets a foul for getting pushed into a zone, right? Hey, they pushed me. Shouldn't be a foul on me. A lot of us, especially when we first enter FRC, this is like a natural thing because, hey, that makes a lot of sense. If someone forces me to commit a foul, I shouldn't be called for a foul. Even though there is a rule that says you can't force a team to commit a foul, that's really tough to legislate. So generally, if you get pushed into like a human player zone, it's going to be a foul on you. So I like to have a conversation with the driver, or have our human player or driver have that conversation with the team that's committing that foul, going like, hey, if they push you in, it's crazy, but it's a foul on you. You can't let that happen. That foul is 5 points. That's the equivalent of scoring 2.5. Sorry, that's the equivalent of scoring a game piece up high. Like, creating that equivalency of like what the foul is worth is also helpful for some teams. Assume they have, not a ton of knowledge on the game, because a lot of times people don't. Their team's going to one competition. You shouldn't hold that against them or be mad at them for it. You should understand that it's a reality of the competition and a reality of their experience. Not try to make it negative for your team or theirs, but try to help set them up for success in their match with you. So you know the rules, I hope. Do your partners, you know the strategy, but do their drivers, who understand the mistake a team has been making, but do they help these teams before the match with you? I take a lot of pride in that teams will kind of take a great leap in the match with us or in their match immediately following ours. If it is on your alliance, you can make them better. You can give them feedback, you can encourage them, you can make them better. Remember that. And remember to always keep it positive. Teams are always going to perform at their best if you keep it positive. And after the match, even if they mess up, keep it positive, because you want them to have a good recollection of playing with your team, so that the next time you play together, whether it's later at that competition or the following year, they're going to be a lot more receptive to the feedback, because it's like, oh, hey, there's that team. They were like fantastic to work with. We messed up X, Y, and Z, and they were still so nice about it. Let's hear what they have to say. So that really builds year over year. I like to think that you're either helping fix the problem, or it's or you only really have yourself to blame when a penalty is committed or like the problem is continuing. More important than any on-field success is that the experience is positive. So keep it light, keep it positive. I'm not going to click on this right now, but we used to do like a rules list that we review with our partners. We don't do it. I think I have time. Let me click on this. We don't do it as much anymore, but we use this is from 2018, just like a list of common penalties, a list of areas of the field to avoid that we would kind of go through with our partners before the match. And we used to go through it with all of our partners. Some teams didn't take this super kindly, so we kind of only do it where applicable now. But we try to maintain a list of common penalties to tell our partners about. Switching back. Okay. Okay. Elims. A lot of people don't do these things. Like, they don't prep for limbs, and it leads to teams panicking and alliances panicking in the limbs. First off, you should know the bracket rules. We are in a double elimination bracket system now. This was new in 2023. You should know who plays which match, where you advance to, if you win a certain match, what the corresponding bumper colors are. Something I always do immediately after a match with this new double elimination bracket is I will go around to our entire alliance and tell them, this is our next match, and these are our bumper colors. And I think it really helps kind of compose teams, especially less experienced teams, just knowing, okay, this is what we need to do to be ready. Your drive team should not be at lunch during lunch on Limbs Day. They should be at lunch during alliance selection. They should be eating that. You don't need your drive team for alliance selection, I hope. Make sure that they're ready to have a conversation with your alliance during lunch. That's when teams come together, especially if you're in like the first match. That's when teams come together to discuss their strategy, to maybe get on the practice field and try stuff. Have everyone ready and available. Lunch during a Limbs Day, don't disappear. That's when a lot of regionals are won and lost. Have an alliance sit down. Be honest. Push partners to be honest too. Play to everyone's strengths and comforts, but don't be afraid to take risks. Something I always do is I will sit down with the entire alliance and I will say, we're all one team now. Our robots, all one unit. Win or lose, it's going to be together. No choice. So there's no reason to hide anything from this point on. We're in this together. Let's talk about what's been going well, what's not been going so well, what parts of our robots have been breaking, what parts of our robots are a little bit suspect, what actions cause these things, and I will always make sure we go first and talk about what our robot is not doing well, what our robot stinks at, where we run into problems, what on our robot is breaking, because this opens up the entire alliance to have this conversation honestly and frankly. And then really, play to everyone's strengths. If the driver feels really comfortable doing something and you can build a strategy around it, do that. If a driver has been really struggling with one part of the game and it's clear and your scouting data shows it and you see it and you can build a strategy around that, do it. These conversations really help build your alliance's strategies. Make sure you know the timing rules for breaks between rounds and when you are up. I anticipate that the breaks between rounds of the double elimination bracket will change this year because they were needlessly long early on in the bracket, whereas later in the bracket it's very helpful for them to be long. So monitor the game, see what these changes will be. Study and discuss each alliance as you progress through the bracket. With the double elimination bracket, you can end up playing really any of the other 7 alliances, so be ready to face any of the 7 other alliances. And I just want to point out, there's an updated backup bot rule that exists for the 2023 season. We actually weren't aware of it at our first event, and it kind of hurt us. The rule used to be if you call a backup bot at a regional, that team is now on your alliance. And the team that you call the backup for is still on your alliance, but they can't play again. In 2023, they changed the rule. If you call a backup bot, they are now part of your alliance, and you have a 4-team alliance, and you can substitute teams in and out as you please. We were at Midwest Regional, and one of our partners seemed like they were going to need a backup bot, and they were our first pick. They were really good. We couldn't afford to lose them from our alliance, so we were prepping to play first match of finals at Midwest, we played 3-on-2 because we didn't realize that this rule exists. We didn't call the backup bot. We easily could have, and we would have had the extra robot. We learned the rule, and then we were aware of it when we went to the New York City Regional, and we needed a backup bot, and we called it because we were like, hey, it's not really going to cost us anything. Let's call in the backup bot, and then we have them available later on if our partner can't get themselves fixed. If our partners do get themselves fixed, we can get them back on the field. So being aware of this rule is very important because it has changed. Okay, Maniac move number 4. Your very own practice field. I do not like waiting for the practice field. Our team does not like waiting for the practice field. One exception is at Champs, you get kind of like a full field practice field, so we like to use that one. If you need it, send someone in the morning, make sure they are fast, get your name on the list, but we try to avoid using the practice field. How do we do this? First, the floor of our pit is a 10-by-10 carpet. So if we need to characterize our drivetrain, for instance, we can do that in our pit. If we need to like a pushing something, we can do that in our pit. If we need to pick up a game piece off the ground, and carpet's important to that, which it usually is, we can do that in our pit. So there's a lot we can test in our pit just by having a carpet that's 10-by-10 as our pit floor alone. And that's really easy to do. We just have a ratty old carpet that we tape down, and then we replace it like once every 2-3 seasons with a fresh one. Simulate any field elements that you can. Here's some, examples. In 2018, there was a scale that was a certain height off the ground, so we just like stacked up a bunch of stuff that was the correct height. I actually saw Team 4122 do this at Brunswick. They had a bunch of stuff stacked up in their pit to simulate the shelf that you pick up, the double substation shelf that they grab cones off of to make sure their height was right. So you can kind of do clever things to get around it. In 2019, we had like a whole panel of a rocket in our pit, so that was really nice because we could use DB to align to it and test if our alignment worked properly. 2023, this past year, we had 1/3 of the scoring grid. Well, actually, not really 1/3. We had pegs. We had pegs, and we had like cubes, so we can test that stuff in our pit. And it was really helpful, and teams sometimes borrowed it. And for a portion of the season, we actually had like a half a charge station that we made rollable, so we could try balancing in our pit. This is from 2019. We had like the level 3 hab climb thing with us, and at Champs, the pit next to ours was open, so we just turned the whole thing into a practice field. No one complained or minded. This year, when we had that charge station, we just kind of put it over by the side of the practice field. A bunch of teams got to use it, but anytime we wanted it, we had a charge station we could use. So, this was from 2019. We just had like a little side practice field, and that year we built a whole mechanism we would want to put on a partner, and we were just kind of, you could see us like working on it in that pit. This one never really amounted to much, but what it was really useful for is we had this suction cup climber, so we could go to teams' pits with this platform. We could have them put their robot on it, and we could put our spare suction cup on and show them how kind of we fit together and what that looked like, so that we were better prepared for our matches. So whenever possible, we try to get some field elements into our pit because they really do come in handy. Okay. Maniac move number 5, pre-match checklist. So things go wrong. Often the same things go wrong with your robot. Make sure problems don't repeat themselves by making a pre-match checklist. Here's what ours looked like in 2023. Let me load this up. Systems check. This is like a pre-flight list, right? All the things you want to do. And we just had this printed out. We check it off. Just to reveal, we did not really stick with this throughout the season. We brought it back at our last competition after we had many durability issues at the competitions before, and we did not break at all at our final competition. That is not a coincidence. Okay, check everything. Look at absolute encoder reporting correct values. A lot of stuff is software checking that stuff is correct on the computer. And we're just kind of going through, checking all this stuff off before we get onto the field. Has all the different mechanisms and all the little things we want to have with us and checked off before the match. Just kind of let you guys look it over as I scroll through. It makes a huge difference. It might seem silly. You might think, oh, we're checking all this stuff anyway. This is a really long list. We're not checking all of the stuff checking off all this stuff anyway. You can't be passive about this. It makes a huge difference. Sorry about that. Let me get this reloaded from the current slide. Maybe. Okay. The rule needs to be, and this is like kind of an area growth for us, is we don't place the robot on the field until the checklist is done. Obviously, you're rushing on the field. You haven't done the checklist. You have to put the robot on the field. We're not going to keep our robot off the field, but our mentality needs to be the robot doesn't go on the field until the checklist is done. The checklist usually gets longer as the season progresses. These checklists are a must for high level and consistent success for match to match. When we don't stick to this, stop doing it, get lazy about it, it always results in our reliability plummeting. And it's really on the people in the pit, the students in the pit, getting the robot ready to stick to it. So it really makes a huge difference. I can't recommend enough doing a pre-match checklist. I'm not in the pits at all anymore. I'm usually with the strategy team, but all I'll say is when I was glued to the pits, we always did pre-match checklists. So hopefully we can make some improvements in 2024. Maniac move number 6. Get to know the event you are at. like really get to know it. Personally meet every team, look at every robot. If you're your team's FRC Maniac, awesome thing to do if you aren't competing. Networking in FRC has become a big part of my life. It's how I've made a ton of friends. It really helped me get my job at Stuyvesant. Whenever I'm at a competition, I always try to find a moment to just walk around the pits and talk to every team. Look at their robot, ask them a question about their robot. It's nice. It's just fun. It's just fun. But I want to know who all the robots are at the competition, so that when we're up against someone, we're with someone, I can go, yeah, I know that robot. I can talk about them knowledgeably because I looked at it closely. I talked to this person on their team and asked them this question. I remember this part of it. Pre-scout every team. Watch any and all matches they have played so far in the season. Champs too, all the matches. Students on my team know that I will fairly often make my own pre-scouting. I call it Blade pre-scouting extravaganza for like a certain competition, and I'll just have notes on the team. And this won't be quantitative notes. It'll just be like, what do I think they do well? What could they do better? Areas where we could, kind of take advantage if we're playing against them, stuff like that. And then the night before limbs, watch as many matches on the Blue Alliance as you can. This has gotten much, much more difficult as I've gotten old because I need my sleep. But luckily, Red Bull exists and is a thing. And the students on the team know that I will go through 2 sugar-free Red Bulls on playoff day. Okay. Competition, final tips. Get there early, get good seats in stands, have stands runners, have your strategy people, your scouts, get the spot planned out where they want to go, a backup spot so they can get good seats. Really important. Used to be more important at New York City before they had like assigned seats. Now we get brushed off to the side where it's kind of the field is invisible because our team is so large. Make packing lists so that you don't forget anything. Don't forget your spares. Measure the field during the field measurement and calibration period. There's usually slight differences between the red and blue side because there's a margin of error for what is like allowed for something to be off. So make sure you know where everything is, especially if it affects your auto routines. Use the practice field for driver practice, especially if you're noticing that your drivers are having a little bit of trouble with something or they need to shake off the cobwebs. Use the practice field for that. Record your matches field side. Use the media badge for this. We have a Slack channel called Pulse View where a student it's not always the same student throughout a competition, but there's a student who is standing, who's like our media person, who's standing and recording matches focused on our robot. Very useful when we're adjusting our autos, figuring out what went wrong with our bot during the match, something broke. The Blue Alliance videos are great, but they're full field. They're going to miss a ton of stuff that's specific about your robot. They're giving you a media badge. Everyone has a phone in their pocket. Record your matches field side. You're going to get a lot of useful stuff there. And make sure it's not like a spacey kid who's there because they're just going to not record the first 5 seconds of auto, which can be... if a student says to me, we didn't record auto or like the first few seconds auto, I will like internally grumble. Then I'll get over it, but it just can't happen. Batteries, get new ones each year. They go bad. Battery performance is one of the biggest separators between good and great teams. So make sure you have good batteries. I recommend MK batteries as a supplier. Do not use Andy Mark, Vex, or West Coast Products or Rev to supply your batteries. MK Batteries is the best battery supplier that there is. And if they have, and these companies, that I just named, they don't manufacture batteries. They're getting them and they're charging you a huge markup. MK they have a FRC team discount. So you have to call them over the phone, but call them up, tell them you're an FRC team, they'll get the discount. They deliver, and it's going to be cheaper and the battery's going to work better. So I didn't accept any ad money from MK, but I highly recommend them. I mentioned this before. Always make pick lists, regardless of your rank. Excellence is not an act, it is a habit. Be known for this, and you are more likely to get picked. And pick listing should start on the final day before limbs. You can ask them questions while they're still there, understand why they are or are not doing something, and take measurements of their bot in case like there's some part of the game where you need to fit many robots together. You can see like how big is their frame, how big is their hook, all that good stuff, and bring that to your evening discussion. At the regional level, do not finalize your pick list until after the qualification matches have played. Give yourself flexibility to change your pick list on the final day of quals, right before limbs. On the final day of competition, right before limbs, because teams are going to have their best matches in there, and their final form for playoffs is going to be shown there. Okay? All right. Maniac pitfall. Things I've learned the hard ways. Please use them as cautionary tales. These are bad things that I've done that you should not do. Not eating. Behaving immaturely. I could never. Not everyone is an FRC maniac, but FRC is for everyone. I really believe that FRC is for everyone. There's something for everyone who's interested in robotics on an FRC team. Just because you are crazy and obsessed with this stuff doesn't mean everyone on your team needs to be. And this is something that I'm still figuring out. But, give people the space to be people, to be kids. Keep it fun. And remember that not everyone's going to be as crazy as you. If you find some other FRC maniacs, those are probably going to be your best friends. So, dive deep with them on it. Keep expectations high. But don't expect people who are just kind of in this kind of a little bit to be at that same level as you, and don't get mad at them when they're not. Be a kid, especially if you are a kid. I said especially if you are a kid. Hilarious. Take it all in and enjoy it. Be an adult. Act like an adult, especially if you're an adult. Everyone's final match of the year, except for the 3 teams that win Worlds, will be either a qualification match or a loss. Learn to find victories in your effort and your approach. Okay. That's my contact info. You can reach out to me at that email, and we have a few minutes for any questions you might have on anything I covered here, or it could be anything at all. Andrew, please facilitate.
The question was,
Can you repeat it?
like, if your scouting team, like your team is really small and you can't get like people to scout, like because there are just not enough people, or people think it's like a really monotonous thing. How do you get people excited about scouting?
That's really tough. It's about the culture. So you have to really prioritize making the scouting fun. So something we used to do is we would print out. This is definitely against DOE rules. So this was before I was a teacher at Stuyvesant High School that I facilitated this. We would, or maybe after, I don't recall. We would print out strat bucks, and the students would gamble on matches with them. And it was a really fun way to get them engaged. And this is something we stole from 1114. The strat bucks may or may not have, but definitely had the pictures of our teachers on them. So that's like one fun way, right? So just keep it fun. Do stickers, do prizes. We've done all sorts of things to engage people in scouting. But also, I really believe that you can have a really awesome strategy team that is like 2 people. I think that if I took Andrew here and I shoved him in the stands for the entirety of a competition, he would be able to make an elite pick list. I firmly believe that if I, took another kid and put them in the stands, we have a bunch of kids who can do that, and then I just had Andrew manage our match strategy and talk to our partners, he could do that. Why do I think this? Well, he's obsessed. He's watched a ton of matches. He's put in a lot of work for this. He's ready to do that kind of thing. So I feel like I could go to a competition and just sit in the stands and make a great pick list because I have a lot of experience with watching matches. I understand the game at a high level. I don't need data to make a pretty good pick list because I have eyes. I see that robot's really good. I'm going to write down that robot's really good. I'm going to write down why they're good. I'm going to write down what kind of autos they have. Am I going to make the perfect pick list? No. Am I going to make the best pick list at the competition? No. But it's probably going to be pretty good. And it's probably going to be better than a lot of teams who have giant strategy teams. So what do you need to make a great strategy team? Well, you need some FRC maniacs who can really study the game well. But in terms of engaging scouts, make it fun. Other questions?
How would you recommend changing the culture?
Oh, sorry, what's that?
How would you recommend changing the culture?
Was that scouting team or just the whole team?
Like the sky team or like the
The entire team.
yeah, the entire team.
Entire. That's really difficult. Which team are you from?
Brooklyn Tech.
Or you don't have to answer that. Which team?
Brooklyn Tech.
Brooklyn Tech. Yeah, so I think team buy-in, team unity is really important. Having adults who are really engaged is important, like mentors is important, but I mean that's a really tough question. I think unity on decisions is really important. Like if you are infighting about a decision the whole season, that's no good, right? Once you make a decision, moving on from it. But we had, like I've been on this team for almost 20 years, and we had a really horrible culture, I would say, for a lot of years. Becoming the teacher made it a lot easier for me to kind of dictate what the team culture looked like. And as a student, that's really difficult. Like you can help with the culture of what the other kids are doing. You can inspire them, working really hard and kind of being that example is really important and helps a lot. But if you don't, have the buy-in from your teacher, or like the head coach of the team really does set a lot of the tone for what the team culture looks like. So I know that's not a super great answer to your question, but that's kind of how I view it.
Does 694?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Does 694 have a mentor's manual or a student guidebook manual on recommended behaviors, decision making, and stuff like that?
No. There are some teams that have some stuff out there. I would recommend looking up Compass Alliance, like a compass.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources that they have on there, and there's probably is a mentor handbook in there. Honestly, a lot of our kind of mentoring style is, we talk about it, right? It's a conversation. We have Zoom calls amongst the mentors. I think the thing that really helps us in terms of our mentor-student relationship, and we're by no means close to perfect, is that the students do ultimately make the final decision on anything that isn't like safety or expenses, right? So like Jason is designing and building an elevator right now. I'm giving him a lot of input on it. I'm giving him a lot of advice, but it's his design. If he disagrees with me, I might be really, I might push really hard to say, hey, this is why I think this, try to explain to him. But ultimately, it's their robot. That's our team culture. It's their robot, and they're going to make the final call. And I do think that helps a lot in terms of kind of the relation. Do we have to go? Oh. All right, anyway, I think that helps a lot with our relationship with the students, is that at the end of the day, they know that they can decide. So when we're giving them advice, they know that's what it is. It's advice. We're not going to force them to build something different. We're not going to force them to go down what we think is the right path. But if we really think it's the right path, we might push really hard.
Any other questions? Yes.
So with the first tech app, a lot of what you said requires a lot of buy-in from the rest of the team, especially like during kickoff. How would you actually unified idea of the robot
So I think the question was, how do you get your team to buy in to like this, like doing a priority list, doing all this stuff? Is that what you're asking? So I think first of all, when I first brought this to our team, I didn't have a ton of buy-in. But I know the next session is starting, so you guys are free to go. I'll just answer this last question as you guys flow out. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I think, showing them that presentation from Karthik, that did a lot of the work for me because that got a lot of the buy-in. It's really hard. It takes time, but it spreads like a virus. The more people you get on board, the more people they will get on board. So try to get as many people with you as possible and try to do it before the season. But it is like, fighting against the ocean sometimes. Just like people won't get on board, and that's really hard. But I can't recommend enough Karthik's presentation and getting your team to watch that. Okay, thanks guys for coming. I know there's another presentation starting in here, right? It's starting in, like now?
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Jason.
If you put it in presenter mode, it actually gives me my notes too. So, like, it's a drop down on the slides right now. It's a drop down. So, like, you see the arrow? Yeah, that one. So, then I get a little note that shows me everything I'm talking about. And that one can get dragged to that one goes.
I can't see, I'm sorry. Oh, I see, oh!
So then,
Can I like present?
yeah.
Wait, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think we got about one more minute here, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get started. This is basically effective first strategies, two effective, two strategies, basically strategies that are so effective that they change the way about how First makes games that we see. So before I get started, this is me. So I'm an alum of an upstate New York team. I mentored in upstate New York through college and then moved to the great land of districts where I've been working with Team 8085 Mojo. But if you've been kind of wandering around saying, okay, well, I tapped too many times on the board. Anyway, but if you've been wandering around saying, I think they look vaguely familiar, I also work with First Updates now. I do FRC Top 25, Recap, and Rewind. So that's what I do in FRC. But enough about me. Let's talk about the chokehold strategy. The chokehold strategy is defined in sort of a First Robotics colloquialism. It's really only used in this program. It's a strategy which, when executed, guarantees victory, independent of any action by your opponents. And that is defined in Karthik Kanagasvapathi's Effective First Strategies. Wonderful presentation on just strategies in general. We're going to dive into ones that guarantee victory, which is always pretty cool. So we're going to break that down into three main categories. In order to be a chokehold, a strategy must exploit a loophole, meaning that you can't really play the game in a way that was meant to be played. You could be playing like 254, 2056, 1678, and still manage to squeak out a win with a chokehold strategy. It must guarantee the win. Finally, it must be a single finite task. If your chokehold strategy requires you to keep playing the game and keep doing things in order to make sure that you're going to win or prevent your opponent from doing something, that's not really a chokehold strategy. That's kind of just playing the game. So those are our three things that we are going to quantify our chokehold strategies with. And with that in mind, there's only been one. So this is where I make the disclaimer that the talk description is a little misleading. We're only really going to talk about one, and then we're going to apply it to a bunch of different things. In 32 years of the First Robotics competition, we have only seen one true legal strategy, chokehold strategy, in FRC. So let's rewind back to 20 years ago, 2002. The game was called Zone Zeal. Now, how many of you know how many pages were in the game manual this year? Can I get a figure? Too many. That is a good one. All right. Can I get a number? 120. 120. Higher.
240.
240. Lower. 130. Higher. 160. 150. Close enough. 142.
142.
Perfect. Thank you. The game manual in 2002 was 13 pages long. So that gives you an idea of how many rules teams actually had to abide by. So Zone Zeal was played with 2 robots per alliance starting in A, B, C, and D up on the screen there. Red starts in red, blue starts in blue. The idea of the game was that you wanted to push these 3 goals that looked like sort of like octagons with sticks sticking up on them. You wanted to push the goals into your goal zone. On blue it was zone 4, on red it was zone 2. Basically moving them over 1. There were also balls. We're not going to talk about that. So each goal that ended up in your goal zone was worth 30 points. Every robot that ended up in their starting zone was worth, every goal was worth 10 points for a total of 30 points. Every robot that finished the match in their starting zone was also worth 10 points. So if your alliance controlled all 3 of these goals, pushed them to your zone for the 10 points that each goal was worth, you would get 30 points. The other alliance could only get 20 points. If you pushed all 3 goals, your opponent could not win. To answer this challenge, Team 71, Team Hammond, built this robot in 2002. This robot was called the Beast, and it lived up to its name. So the way that they did this was, we'll start from the top and work down. The robot had folding arms that sprung out to span the width of the entire field. The entire field, FRC field, really big, bigger than this room. Not really, maybe. I don't know. Smaller than this room, I'll amend that. The way that it did this was it had a flop bot design. robots in 2002 weren't measured the same way that we measure robots now. It was kind of like an FTC thing where you had like a PVC box and you put the robot in the PVC box, and if it didn't have anything that extended out of that, it was legal. Good job. You can expand anywhere beyond that in the match. They stopped doing this in 2006 for obvious reasons. So, flop bot design. What the robot does is at the beginning of the match, it takes its vertical configuration and falls over. Now your robot has a lot more room that it can deal with and expand into. So once it flops down, it goes into high gear. So basically, it is sprinting across the field after it's fallen down to get to those 3 goals. It has to latch onto the goals before its opponents because, you need to control all 3 goals. So this robot falls down, expands to the width of the field, sprints across, and then latches on permanently to these 3 goals. And when I say permanently, I do mean permanently, like had to get a wrench after the match so that they could get the goals off of the robot, kind of permanently. So they do that. And then, if you've ever heard of 71 2002, prior to this, you've heard of their file card drive system. Now, they have the goals, sure, but if they're in high gear, they're going to be easy to push. They aren't going to be able to push these goals, which, by the way, weigh 180 pounds, more than our robots today, and you're pushing 3 of them, so that's 360 pounds already. Anyway, that's a lot. So you're pushing that, you're pushing your own robot, you're pushing any robot that decides to play defense on you. The way that 71 engineered this is that they used file cards, which are metal brushes that you use to clean files, that dug into the carpet and walked their way at 3/4 of an inch per second into their goal zone. Literally shuffled across the field, could not turn, could not let go, and proceeded to bring all 3 goals every single time they latched on into their goal zone. So,
Did this damage the carpet?
it absolutely did damage the carpet, and that's why it's labeled soon to be illegal, because they didn't want teams doing that. So, was Team 71 a chokehold? Yes. They fulfill every single one of these 3 things that we're going to break it down on. So yes, they exploited a loophole in the rules. They had at least 4 rules made after them in 2003 to repair loopholes that they had created. Yes, it was a single finite task. Every single match, they would go, they would put their arms out, they would proceed to go there. They didn't have to do anything else in that match besides that one task. Did it guarantee the win? Every time they executed it, yeah, there were 18 matches where it didn't work, especially because at their first regional, they only had the middle one and the side one working, so didn't really work at their first regional. Worked every match since. They won the national championship, etc., etc. So 71 2002 works because they're an absolute lock. They figured out the strategy, and then they were able to execute it on the back half. They're the only team to truly break an FRC game. They won the national championship, they had 3 rules made, yeah. However, there are 18 matches where they didn't win, and that's because they need to latch perfectly onto the goal, and sometimes the goals moved a little bit before they could get to them. Even with that high gear, there were still teams that were faster than them. Sometimes, accidentally, instead of latching onto the goal, they latched onto their partner. And that's what this lovely toaster of an image is here. So this is 71, who latched onto the top goal and the goal that's closer to us. But unfortunately, they missed the other goal and latched onto their alliance partner, Team 67. And again, they can't let go. So 67 is being dragged with 71 into their goal zone, along with their 2 goals. Team 68, who's on the opposing alliance, decides to take that goal that they didn't grab onto and continue pushing it towards their zone. They have a chance here. They have a chance. Until they don't, because 68 then latches onto one of the goals that 71 has. And 71 proceeds to drag the 3 goals, their alliance partner, and another opposing robot into the zone and win the match. So that's something. Speaking of 68, though, we have kind of our half runner-up here, where in 2003, 68 attempted a chokehold strategy that was quickly deemed illegal by FIRST, unfortunately, very unfortunately. So the way the 2003 game works is that you had 2 ramps at the side of the field, you had a big stack of toads in the middle, and you wanted to score and stack as many as you could on your scoring side. 68 started on the opposite side. What they would do is they would run into that stack of toads, force as many as they could onto their side of the field until they had more on their side of the field than they did on their opponent's side of the field. And then they would expand these really great big arms and lock down the field completely, meaning that no one who's on their side of the field can go to the opposite side of the field, and none of the toads that were on their scoring side of the field could be moved to their opponents for scoring. So it would have worked. Unfortunately, FIRST did rule this illegal, and they had a great season not doing this. But to this day, it's the reason that robots can't collude to shut down gameplay, or contact the outside of the field, or grab or grasp onto field elements. So it was a great strategy until it was illegal. But that brings us to the point, why haven't we seen a chokehold strategy since 2002? We've had a lot of FRC games since then, but really, we've had a lot of years where FIRST has learned to grow and change with people who are also playing the game. We have a very robust Q&A system, we have consistent rule updates, and we have a math competition that is really getting into it back there. Yeah. But it's also increasingly difficult to control large areas of the field. Like in 2006, we had limit extensions on how far we could reach. It's directly impacted by 71 and a little bit by 68 too. It's also, you can see it in other robotics competitions, like Vex Robotics is a really good example of this. Vex Robotics has a lot less limits on expansion, and we've seen a few strategies that get close to being chokehold strategies in Vex. Specifically, the 2013 game had a great chokehold strategy where you could just have one robot, that's the picture at the bottom there, kind of just cover where your opponent would score, and they couldn't score anything. We also have possession limits in FRC, so you can't just collect all the balls and have them be on your side of the field. It doesn't work like that anymore. We're more dependent on our partners doing work for us, and also we have ranking points. So everything in FRC is kind of built to not have a chokehold strategy, but, you know, why do we even talk about them? And honestly, okay, one, they're really fun to talk about. I mean, like, I'm here, I'm talking about them, you guys are here, so, you know, it's kind of fun. And then we always have that one kid at kickoff, or maybe you've been that kid, I've been that kid, that comes up to you and they're like, all right, I have a strategy that is going to win us every single match, and then they proceed to, like, tell you the most illegal strategy you've ever heard. Yeah, been that kid, love being that kid, because that kid has a point. That kid does have a point. If once you analyze the game mathematically, you can see what objectives you need to do strategically. 254, 2018, fantastic example of this. The chokehold strategy in 2018 would reasonably be to hold down the scale at the middle of the field for the entirety of the match. You would win every single time because the scale is held down for you, and your opponent isn't getting any of those points because it's higher up. So that was illegal. Yeah. But the way that you would want to do that legally is you want to win the scale basically every single time. And to do that, you need to win the scale early. So 254 implemented the world's most beautiful, most consistent 3-cube autonomous in the world. And they won every single match. 53-0, perfect season, won the championship, beautiful robot. It's that thinking about implementing that chokehold strategy that led them to that. So another half of that, besides the offensive half, is how can we play defense better in order to really decrease our opponent's max score. And in 2022, we saw that when other teams would play defense and they'd collect the balls of your opponent's color and make sure that your opponent couldn't score those balls. In 2023, we saw it with some teams that had alternate climbing methods where robots could have forks that they stuck under one of their alliance partners that allowed them to get up onto the charge station without having to finagle it back and forth. So they could play defense on a robot that didn't have those forks, that needed to get onto the charge station, and that took more time. So it's that kind of thinking that leads us to our final two examples here. And for our first one, let's go back a few years. Let's talk about the 2010 game. 2010 game was called Breakaway. We are in the era of 3 robots per alliance. Don't worry about 2 anymore. We have 1 robot allowed in the opposing alliance's zone. So if you're on blue, you can only have 1 robot in the far red zone. Same goes for blue. Scoring was really simple. 1 point per ball scored. There were 12 balls on the field. Only 12. That's a very small number. They were reintroduced via track above the alliance's zone. You can see it in the picture there. It runs along the top. And it reintroduced balls back into the center zone. Now, reasonably, the chokehold strategy in this game would be to own all the balls and keep them to yourself and always keep scoring them, and have a mechanism that reached up to the top of that track and always the balls were in your possession. Didn't work like that. You could only have 1 ball in your possession at a time. But there's a method to that madness. And Team 469, Las Gorillas, was able to take advantage of that. So, Las Gorillas in 2010 parked themselves right under that track that ran across and was able to direct in 2 different directions the balls that came in over the track. So, remember that 1 defense robot? They could change which direction the flipper was attached to so that it could avoid the defense robot. It locked into the tunnel with a lock, so you couldn't play defense on this robot in any other way other than like sitting in front of it. It was legal. The rails did fit in starter configuration. Great. And in addition to that, so you had to kind of start the cycle with 469. So they had a scoring mechanism because you did have to score at least 1 goal for the ball to come back across the track. So they did have a scoring mechanism that was able to start the cycle. So the real question becomes, was 469 a chokehold? No, not at all. They exploited a loophole in the rules fantastically. It's just a robot that was really, really well designed. So they didn't guarantee the win. They played against other teams who were better offensively than them, and it definitely wasn't a single finite task. They had to keep scoring and keep going over the course of the match in order to make their score keep going higher than their opponents. The reason 469 2010 works so well is that the 2010 game was really difficult. Like, you could only possess 1 ball and it could only be like so much in your robot, like it had to like not be fully in your robot or something like that. It was weird. Scores, you remember that each ball in a goal was worth 1 point. Scores were between 0 and 5 for most regionals up until champs. So 469 cycled more efficiently than like 99% of the field out there. It also worked because there's only 1 defense robot allowed. If there were 2, you can see how both of those paths would be kind of cut off by that. So it didn't work all the time, and it wasn't a chokehold strategy really because it could not stop opponents from scoring. It wasn't guaranteed that 469 would win. And you really didn't deny your opponents any points. You didn't deny anything, basically. You were just playing offense really well. It would be a few more years in FRC before we saw true points denial come into play again. And that was the game that Howard, very lovely presentation this morning, you ignored 2015, so we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So 2015, Recycle Rush. Best FRC game ever if you're not into FRC games. This was one of the worst FRC games that we have ever had. Fantastic robot design challenge. Like being able to stack things, really interesting in terms of like technical skill, not interesting to watch at all. Like there are 2 minutes and 29 seconds of a match that you can absolutely fast forward through because you were only paying attention to 1 second of that match. So, 2015, the way the game works is you have these totes that are in the middle of the field and also can be introduced via your human player stations. So you want to stack as many of these in six stacks as possible. A 6 stack of totes was worth 12 points. That's fairly reasonable. A 6 stack with a cap, because there was also a secondary game piece, and it was called the recycling container. A 6 stack with a recycling container on top of it was worth 42 points. That is a 30-point difference. That is huge in terms of scores here. 3 recycling containers start the match on your side. There are 4 recycling containers in the middle of the field, up for grabs, at any point during the match. So we're talking Einstein level here, because we can ignore the rest of the game. So on Einstein, it was a can race for these cans in the middle. Teams were basically building faster can grabbers all throughout the season, because they knew that once they got to Einstein, it would be a race for those 4 multipliers. Most teams could only grab 2 in the center and pull them back, and you had your fastest face off against the slower robot. So most teams ended up pretty equal, and it became a who's gonna mess up first kind of thing. But reasonably, if your opponent makes at least 3 stacks, and you know that you're gonna make at least 3 stacks, both of you are probably gonna make more. If you can grab more cans than them off the middle, then you've basically guaranteed yourself the win if you can use the cans that you've collected off the middle. So that is what 1114 and 900 did in 2015. I want you to look at this video. For all 4 cans in the middle and then winch them back so that maybe they could get 1, because even if they got 1, their opponents would have 0. And they would need to make 3 more stacks than them in order to get that done. You'll note the soon-to-be illegal cheesecake little blurb there. Yeah, a lot of teams in 2015, 2016 built mechanisms for each other, and they would actually install them onto their alliance partners come eliminations. This was ruled illegal over a few seasons by FRC, and it's why we have the major mechanism wording in the manual now, but regardless to say, it isn't legal. Alas.
Everybody loves cheesecake.
Everybody loves cheesecake. Ugh, I have so many opinions. Anyway, were the harpoons a chokehold? Yes, they exploited a loophole. They built this robot in 7 hours based on a design that 1114 had. Was it a single finite task? For 900 it was, but you did need to get to the point where you had 3 stacks and your opponent wasn't going to build 3 more stacks than you. Did it guarantee the win? Who knows? This is the greatest tragedy of the 2015 game, is that the harpoons never saw the field. They were eliminated before the harpoons could go out there by, I think it was less than a single point. But the harpoons never went on an FRC field, and it is the greatest tragedy of anything. The harpoons would have worked because they deny both sides the multipliers, and 1114's alliance then relies on stacking, which they were better at. If even 1 can gets winched back into the area where 1114 can grab it, they guarantee the win because their opponents had none and they were basically even on stacking. 1678 won the world championship that year, by the way. Fastest can grabbers in the world by far. So, evidence. The reason that they might not have worked is that it relies on 1114 and 148, so that's the other 2 robots on the alliance. That is only 2 robots. They need to outstack 3 other robots. And they were doing it, but in theory, it's not a chokehold because, 3 is greater than 2. Strategy only works if both sides make more than 3 stacks, and one of the 1114 side makes, there's a 3 stack difference in there. Anyway, you can't guarantee the win if you actually never played the match. That is the big thing there. That's why they didn't work. Rip to Cheesecake, you would have loved 2023 robots. Anyway, in conclusion, with confidence, there will not be a pure chokehold strategy in the 2024 game. It is so still worth it to consider what might have been if there weren't rules, though. Asking yourself at kickoff, what is our max score? What's our opponent's max score? How can we make ours higher than theirs? And then once you've done all that, and all your strategies align with the highest possible score, then you can ask, well, how do we get there? Even if we have to crawl inch by inch. Right, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you StuyPulse for hosting. If you want more like niche deep dive content, on First Updates Now we have a show called First Rewind. I run that. So check that out. Good luck in 2024, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks. Okay, pink shirt, you had a question like halfway through. Yeah. Oh, okay. You got it.
The worst part of 2015 was not seeing those bad things there. And the Citrus Alliance's response to some of our moves. They had 50-12 cheesecake with citrus canned graphics.
Yeah, they had extra graphics.
So they were planning on if the harpoons come out, they're going to put 50-12 in instead of 16-17.